All right, hi everybody. I'm Narcogen.
I'm Blackstar, and here we are talking about nothing involving gaming whatsoever.
No, we're going to talk about Star Wars: The Force Awakens instead.
Because everyone else is talking about Star
While you
Wars:
watch
The Force
videos
Awakens.
of Star Wars Battlefront in the background, because the trailer is just not long enough to cover what we're going to talk about with this movie, I think.
Well, maybe we can throw in highlights. Yeah, you'll watch me die a lot in this, so get ready. That'll be funny.
Okay, so I had divided. I mean, first of all, did you like it?
The movie? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
In fact, I got a chance to see it in supposedly one of the best theaters in the country. This is actually one of the IMAX 4K laser projections with 3D. So, yeah, other than injecting it directly into your skull, this is supposedly the best viewing experience that you could possibly have.
Okay. Well,
personally, I want to comment. I didn't quite have that because the goggles they use, they're active and they reuse them, and I don't think mine were the cleanest things in the world, so I was getting kind of a weird effect. I want to see the 4K 2D projection with the laser, because the contrast with the laser, oh my god, it was absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I didn't see that. I've seen it twice in 2D and in English. No 4K laser nonsense though, and not even IMAX. I don't know if they have an IMAX showing that's not the 3D.
It might have just,
it
might have just been a DPS projector, But either way, I got, and this is like one of 7 or 8 theaters in the country, and I'm lucky because this one is like less than a half an hour away. So that was awesome. The actual movie itself, yes, I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely, I did my best to not have expectations, or at least to minimize them.
Oh, I had zero. I mean, I literally had zero. You know from talking to me before, I had not even actually gone so far as to decide that I would see it.
Yeah.
Until after I had read several reviews, and I did not care. I also did not care about spoilers. Basically, I would say, look,
really?
if it's that good, if it's that good, you can go ahead and spoil me, and I will still enjoy it. And if it isn't, then I wouldn't really care, because I think I spent all of my fanboy anticipation over that before the first prequel came out, because I really was convinced that was going to be good.
Oh yeah. we all were. It was 99. It was a long time ago, and the first trailer we saw was like, whoa.
First trailer was good. The trailers for Phantom Menace were good.
Yes, those were the only thing that was good about Phantom Menace. But anyway, about this one, to be honest, I was not sold myself. I had actually seen the first trailer that they'd put out, and to be honest, Kylo Ren's Darkwing Duck mask and everything really didn't have me sold. But what really got me, to tell you the truth, was not the trailers, was not the ads, was not the reviews. It was a small piece that I had seen on Slash Film, not a sponsor, that actually showed a small segment of the makers of this, of the crew, of the cast, talking about what they wanted to do here, which was making something with practical effects that they were all fans, and they've been wanting this forever, and they all were thrilled to participate and do it. And that's what got me misty-eyed. And I said, damn it, now I gotta see it.
Okay, but we did kind of know that. I mean, I think Abrams had said in advance, and so did lots of other people attached to it who were allowed to say anything at all, was that I think they blamed a lot of the failure of the prequels on Lucas's approach that emphasized effects over acting, and that did so much on green and blue screens, and that they were gonna build models, and they were gonna use practical sets and props and that kind of stuff.
And it shows through big time. It really does.
For me, that wasn't enough. Like, to me, like, yes, those are faults
no, but
in the prequels.
It's a great foundation, though. I mean, if you got a starting point and you're going to say, hey, we're going to make this as real world as we can.
It would also help to have a story that mostly makes sense, or at the very least,
well written
character. Well, even say well written is maybe going too far. Looking at the first films and the new one.
No, I'm not saying it was well written, but I'm just saying wanting it to be.
Yeah, having a character whose motivation is relatable, I think probably is, and the new one definitely has that. The thing I notice is that they give a lot of the characters basically the same character motivation.
Oh well, yeah.
Except for Finn. Finn is a little bit out there. Like Rey is hanging out on Jakku because she thinks her family, whoever they are going to come back. Right. So she wants to be reunited with her family.
Yes.
Kylo
or whoever
Ren,
left her. That's not clear at that point. You know, they don't quite give any details. Yeah, she doesn't say anything either.
Right. Kylo Ren, who is actually Ben Solo, was the son of Han Solo and Princess Leia, wants to be reunited with his grandfather for reasons, I guess, that we will find out a little bit more later. But I would say whatever it is, basically, he was sent off the Jedi boarding school by his parents. He didn't react well to that, and for some reason, basically, has decided that greatness skips a generation, and he wants to be the new Darth Vader. But that's still a family-related motivation.
Maybe they explain this in all the other venues that they put out there between the animations and cartoons and the other stuff.
They've thrown almost all of that stuff out, and now they're probably going to start. They're probably going to start recycling bits of the expanded universe as they go, and people will start to point out, "Hey, so-and-so new character is really just so-and-so from this book or this comic or this other thing, and with a few details changed." And I think they just want the complete freedom to do that, to say, all right, we like these concepts, these characters, these storylines, and we're going to recombine them and use them as delight, but they're not trying to shoehorn this into that continuity. So if there's a continuity where the Kylo Ren character is the same as something else, and I think in the EU, I think Han Solo and Leia do have a kid, and maybe he does turn out to be a bad Jedi, and I don't know, and I don't care. But for whatever reason, the family member he identifies with is Vader. So Leia and Solo kind of want to reclaim their kid, and he wants to reclaim his grandfather, who in his view has been murdered by his uncle.
Well, see, that's one thing I wanted to bring up. What is it about the family structure or the upbringing that these characters have, where everyone's running around murdering their parents? I just,
it's Greek tragedy. I mean, it is. I mean, it's all very classical.
You'd think, but you'd think we'd have evolved to this point, or at least this particular, galaxy far, far away where there are humans and everything going on. We'd evolved beyond that, and apparently we haven't. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad. Sure, it makes for great melodrama, but at the same time, conceptually, if you actually would have put that in your life and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to murder our parents here," that's a little harsh. So, from my perspective, for this to be repeating itself yet again. I don't know if it smacks of laziness or is just that they're giving homage to previous themes intentionally. Do you know what I mean? So
I had made a list of a bunch of stuff, and one of the categories I had was stuff that I thought was not that great, but was not as bad as what people say. And I would say,
are there people saying
the fan service? Yeah, the fan service element.
I've been watching.
I mean, there's kind of, you can divide it into two categories. Like, one are just the inside jokes and the fan service, right? The insubstantial little references, the nods and winks at stuff.
The Kessel Run in less than 14 parsecs. 12. I mean, yeah.
Oh, that I would say is a little even more significant, though, because that actually works. Even if you didn't get that was a reference, though, that works on its own level. You know what I'm saying? It functions on its own level. It works just as well as the first reference. You still don't know what the Kessel Run is or where.
Nope.
What you know is that it's a measure of how fast the ship is. And in the first one,
and yet
he's bragging about it because it's the only ship that ever did it. And in the second one, it works because you know that she thinks the ship is fast, but still not as fast as he thought it was. So that works as a reference, but it also just works as a bit of character business. But I mean the other stuff, like there's a bit in the last third of the film, I think, on Starkiller Base where you're listening to the new Stormtrooper audio, and there's a bit where one of them literally says, "I think they may be splitting up now. I think they may be in sections 4 and 5 now, sir." I heard that. Which is just audio. It's just a line. It's a throwaway line by extras, and it's just thrown in verbatim here. And there's a bunch of those too, and that's just pure fan service.
Yep. I will say this. One thing I absolutely loved was the setup in the introduction to the Falcon. They're running away for this other spaceship.
Oh yeah.
I'm not doing that. That's a piece of garbage. And they're running to it. Then it blows up and says, "The garbage will be fine." I absolutely loved that. I really, really did.
But again, I would say, just like the Kessel reference, it functions on both levels.
Yeah.
If you're a fan and you see that, you know it works because of the reference. But even if it's not, it's a perfect setup and cut down. They're going for one ship, and she rejects that one, and it's completely out of view, and then it comes into view. It's all if you don't know the old films, is that that they wanted that other ship that didn't look that good, and how regardless of how this one looks, in her opinion, it was worse. Yeah. And as the film goes on, she comes up with specific information that leads you to believe that she's got knowledge and experience. In other words, that the relationship between her and that trader who is buying her scrap, that she's been on the ship, she's perhaps even worked on the ship, and she's aware of the work that's been done on the ship.
Yeah, and why it's a piece of garbage.
Right, so that actually couches the audience's own familiarity with the character, right? So it's not like, you're on the same footing. Like, you feel you know the ship if you watch the old movies, and she feels she knows because she has some familiarity with it.
Yep.
So anyway, but then there's the repetition of scenes and films. In other words, of themes. In other words, so we start out on a desert planet, and then there's a snowy area, and then there's a jungle planet, and there's a bar that everybody goes to, and there's all these repeated scenes, and people have said, like, well, all you've done is you've remade the first film.
Oh, he did.
Thrown in
he totally
some
did.
stuff.
Yep. Yes, I love the scene where they're sitting around and they're all showing the base that they have to destroy and whatever else. Goes, this is the Death Star. This is your Death Star on drugs. And they show this thing is 10 times bigger than the other one. I just had to laugh. It's like, look, this was the first one we blew up that was really bad enough. This one's even bigger. So I just absolutely had to laugh. Seriously, we needed to do that.
I did laugh at it.
One thing that didn't work. I'm sorry. The whole sun charging thing. It's like,
all right.
Wow.
We'll talk about that. I have some reservations about that. Mostly, I'll hand wave them away and just say, all right, fine, whatever. But yeah. But for me, I would say
physics. I want Tyson to come in and say, "This is stupid."
No, he already did.
Oh, he
basically
did?
said, "Yeah, he did." He already made a comment about it.
I didn't even see it, but thank you.
Basically,
Thank you, Mr.
the process of charging that weapon just would have destroyed the planet, and they'll just hand wave that away by saying, because of the such and such and such and such, it contains the power of the sun, which is. If you could contain the power of the sun inside a sphere, you don't really need to worry about anybody else because, whatever.
I feel so gratified to know that exists, and I swear to God, I had no idea that he had actually done that.
That wasn't even the first thought I had, though. The
Really?
first thought, because I figured they would just wave it away. They would say that the thingamajig doohickey has the job of solving that problem. So fine. No, it's the way the sequence ends, which is different from what they did with the last couple, right? This one basically it absorbs the entirety of the star into itself, right? Ready to charge and then release that energy in a beam form to destroy some planets, which they already did once, and I have a problem with that scene too.
Yeah.
But then they managed to blow it up, and it's only there for a few seconds, so you kind of don't even process what's gone on there. But what happens is that when they blow up the planet, it reveals the sun.
Yeah, inside
underneath. So I'm thinking, all right. So now what they've done in this system, and I'm still not even sure what system that is anyway, is that they've moved the sun from where it used to be
to where it is.
Yeah,
that's gonna mess up a lot of things.
Which would be probably just as destructive to every planet in that system as having fired the beam. So I don't know what everybody's happy about.
No, neither do I. And not to mention the fact that once that sun is gone and the radiant heat is now no longer available, all the other planets in that system are going to die and freeze. So how is it possible sucking in the sun into this ball that one doesn't either A, overheat, or B, start to freeze from the outside? It makes no sense.
We were trying to figure out first whether this was supposed to be a roving thing like the original Death Star was.
Oh, it travels around.
Although they never resolved that either. Like, how was the Death Star propelled? Like, I mean, and also,
I love how they're orbiting at maximum velocity. Huh?
It destroys one planet in one system, and then it moves to another one. Does does it go into hyperspace? Does it have light speed? If not, how long does it take to get there? I mean, it took forever just to orbit around a moon to get into firing position.
Gravitational disruption going to mess the other planets up in whatever system it's in?
But
it's a big thing.
It moved from position to fire on Alderaan to being able to fire on Yavin. And of course, there's never, I mean, maybe the EU had it, but I never saw a map or something that indicated, okay, here are the distances between systems. Sometimes I think they really ought to be putting this into some kind of an area like Firefly, where it's only one system. You know, we're not talking about a galaxy of different systems. It's all just a big system with a lot of planets, just to crunch the distances. But that's just not epic enough for the stories.
It was a whole galaxy far, far away, so we can bounce around between all of them. So, in fact, it's funny that you mentioned that, because the Star Killer destroying multiple systems with multiple deploying of this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That in and of itself just seemed kind of weird and odd the way that happened.
It's hokey. It's hokey. The shot is hokey, showing it splitting. But again, my problem wasn't
distances between it all.
That's just it. I couldn't figure out. It's like, wait a minute, what are we looking at here?
Yeah.
Is this firing at multiple planets in the same system? Because there's this shot with a frame, and you've got multiple globes, very large, you know, in the frame. And I'm thinking, all right, maybe they're blowing up something that's like in an Mars orbit. But from what distance are you looking at that these things are these big? These planets are ready to crash into each other if you don't blow them up right now. I mean,
it's. But anyway, okay, and then they're disbelief gone there. So
and then they're looking up from the planet where Maz Kanata's bar is. That they're looking up, and I'm like, wait a minute, are all these planets in the same system?
Yeah,
or are they? I mean. I realize that the first film also has those same flaws with regard to not knowing, but
you're
they've
remaking
doubled
a flawed
down on
thing.
it.
You're going to end up with a flawed thing.
They've doubled down on it. Like I can maybe forgive it that, like, okay, the Death Star moves. I don't know how it moves or how fast it moves, but let's just take it as read. It blows up this planet, then it goes over here and blows up that planet. Fine. We don't belabor it too much. But now you're throwing in the MERV thing and eating the sun. What happens to the system? It eats the sun, and then it's got to go to another one.
All the other planets in that system, are gone. They die. It's like, okay, it's killing two groups of people for the price of one.
Yeah. But about the repetition, I would have more of a problem with the repetition of all those themes, scenes, locations, and character tropes if the series that we hadn't dealt with now didn't basically have 2.5 good movies and 3 bad ones.
Right.
I like that, you know, it's 3 up and 3 down. It's the end of an inning. I would say they rightfully started, hey, look, for all the kids out there, we're starting over.
Yep.
They don't know what this thing is.
Yep.
You know, maybe their kids are those parents who are horrified to find out that their kids like the prequels and think the old movies are crap because the effects aren't as good.
I know some crazy people that do have their cherry pick thrill of the prequels, and strangely enough, there are people who do like them for whatever reason. I don't know whether it's because they're such fanboys or because there's something unique to them that appealed to them. Who knows? I personally am not a big fan. Before I did watch this, I did actually watch all 3 of the originals, which is episode 4, 5, and 6, for those people paying attention.
The despecialized?
No, not the despecialized. I did get the Blu-rays, and they do have some of the added effects and the added sounds and a couple of the computer animated or computer generated models. But the Han scene, Han and Greedo, I guess, fire simultaneously, because there have been like a couple of different versions.
Yeah,
the original he fired first, which is the original, the only, and the true. I don't know what it is where this suddenly became a thing, where a person pointing a weapon at you and you shooting them under the table, that was bad. I don't see how that is a bad thing, or why suddenly legally that became the whole, we can't have him shoot first, that makes him a bad guy. Huh?
Blame Lucas's kids.
Yeah, when somebody's pointing a lethal weapon at you, you have the total right to defend yourself, and that includes shooting him under a table. So
I'm not even saying that has to be true, but the whole point was that Solo was the kind of guy who would do that because he lived the kind of life where if you weren't the kind of guy who did that, someone else was going to shoot you.
Yeah, I'm
like,
sorry.
If he doesn't do that, then he's Greedo in that scene.
77 to 97, suddenly that became a legal issue where he felt it was necessary to change that. The same way we're going back to E.T., instead of having the feds carrying around weapons and guns with kids, they're now holding radios.
That's not a legal issue. It has nothing to do with that. Those 2 guys grew up and had kids and didn't want to explain to their kids the complexity of these issues.
They felt
and
that they
also,
had to alter
okay,
it.
Admittedly,
that's what I don't get.
the gun in E.T. is a red herring anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's a total red herring.
Oh well, yeah.
And in a way that Solo shooting Greedo is not. That is the bit of business that explicates his character, and that's the whole point.
By the same venue, though, is that they felt it necessary to go back and change it. They're retconning stuff that had made before. Nobody felt like they had to do the same thing to go back to the French Connection and take out all the racist dialogue that Hackman put in, because you listen to that movie nowadays, you're lucky that
nobody's making a sequel to that either.
No, but the fact that they didn't feel it was necessary, why would
the thing that always blew me away about that first scene was is that they changed the scene to basically make Greedo shoot first and somehow miss at point blank range in a way that looks ridiculous.
But
not that even aside from that,
he's not that bad.
Even aside from that, they don't change Solo's language, which the line before that is essentially a threat. So somehow the threat goes from "over my dead body," which is like, if you want to do that, you're going to have to kill me. Is basically a threat that says, I'm going to let you have the first shot, and then I will retaliate.
No
it doesn't make
sense. Absolutely none.
Oh. Okay, so Death Stars.
So yes.
The way I started to look at it, though, it was wrong to place the blame on the new movie for saying, hey, why did you have to throw a third Death Star in there?
Mm-hmm.
Because, frankly, the fault is in Jedi for throwing in the second. If you erase that, if you take the second Death Star out of the equation, then all you've got is Chapter 4 starts with 1, and then Chapter 7 starts with 1, and you've got a clear distinction between the two in terms of the way they look, the way they act, that one is bigger and more powerful than the other one, as opposed to the second Death Star, which was basically
under
construction, same, except it wasn't finished, and they threw in a shield which somehow had a part in an elaborate double bluff, right? where they wanted the rebels to come attack the thing. They leaked the idea that it wasn't finished. They knew that the shield had a place it could be disabled. They knew that the rebels were going to attack there, and instead of preventing all of this from happening, they let it go to the end and then surprise you with, hey, we have some soldiers here. And it's really stupid. Like, I'm watching that part again. I mean, I
devious.
Yeah, there are parts of Jet, and it goes off the cliff when it comes to the battle with the Ewoks and all that.
Yes,
and all that stuff.
Was totally off.
But
the
even
rails.
the other parts of it that I used to like, I found harder to swallow on rewatching.
Really,
which doesn't happen to me with the first film, and doesn't happen with Empire.
Yeah. What was it?
And that I was just thinking, like, what is the Empire thinking here? They're like, they built one thing, they got it blown up, and their first end was like, all right, fine, let's build another one.
Yeah, see,
how is this one different?
That logic. Yeah, they keep building these giant space-based weapons that suddenly, I don't know, for whatever reason, really seem explodey after a while. And you'd think they would move away from that. Not to mention the fact, from a military standpoint, if you have a target or an objective, why don't they, if you can fly your planet to come up and shoot it, why not simply deliver whatever weapon that you need to the planet to blow it up? Why not a rocket, a missile, a very large bomb? I mean, if you could get within point-blank shooting range of the darn thing, you could deliver something disposable.
Even if we just take them on face value, all right, which is that as a weapon, the thing is useful, right? It's worth building, it's worth having if it works.
Why?
Okay, the first one had a fatal flaw. The fatal flaw got exposed and then exploited. So presumably that flaw is fixed in the new one, right?
Right. Yeah, except they put a vent cover.
Except that it's not done, which means that
it's
another flaw is exposed. So instead of having to shoot a very precise tube that will route your projectile right to the center of the thing and therefore blow it up, you just fly directly there and shoot it up. But they were drawn there by the false intelligence that said that the thing was incomplete, which was not true, and that the Emperor was going to be there, which was
it wasn't
true,
complete.
might
It
as well
was
not have been,
operational. That
because
was the big thing. It wasn't complete.
because they were gonna be drawn. Well, they were drawn there by two things. One is that it was not operational, and second that the Emperor was overseeing. So the idea was it would be irresistible to the rebellion that they would be forced to bring an attack force there to have a chance at taking out the Death Star and the Emperor and decapitating the Empire, which is of course exactly what happened.
Right.
And we're supposed to believe that this was all part of his plan. Except I don't know why that plan would involve actually being on the Death Star, when the whole point of it was just they thought he was there, and that was enough to draw them. You didn't actually have to go there. Just if on the off chance that something went wrong, you could just not be there. Or you could have leaked the idea that it was non-operational and incomplete when it was actually complete. So then they couldn't have flown in, and they couldn't have blown up the person the way they did it. I mean, the first half of Jedi doesn't depend on that at all, because it's all about rescuing Han Solo. And then there's a little interlude where Luke goes back to Dagobah and talks with Yoda for the last time, and then it goes into this other attack. And I don't know why couldn't it have just take the Death Star out and make it just that they've gotten information that the Emperor is on the Empire's flagship, and it's located in a certain place, and we're going to run a sneak attack. And then it turns out that no, it's not a sneak attack because they leaked it. In other words, it could have been something else. It didn't have to be a Death Star.
Right.
It could have been the rebels think they have a chance at killing the Emperor, and they go there and they're outnumbered, and then they win anyway. Which you wouldn't expect. Just like you don't expect a bunch of small fighters to be able to blow up this big battle station thing. And then you don't have a Death Star. And then when Abrams does his, it's cool, another Death Star. It's not a third one. It's only a second one.
Right.
But there's nothing special about that second one. It's well executed effects for the most part, but they could have lost it. It didn't have to. It pulls away. In fact, you can even see in the ending of Jedi the beginning of the unraveling of the multiple angles that Lucas got mired in during the prequels, right? Because the original Star Wars is really very simple in its conclusion, right? You're cutting back and forth between just 3 locations, and only one of them actually has action in it. There's the dogfight that's going on above the surface of the Death Star, right? And then there's the Rebel headquarters where they're observing the battle, and then inside the Death Star where they're observing the battle. And that's just basically reaction shots, right? You're just looking at faces so they can express, their thoughts about how the battle is going.
Well, that's something about the original Star Wars I didn't quite understand on the dogfight tactics, because when you see the rebels actually attacking this, they've got how many fighters? 20 tops, including the bombers and whatever else?
Yeah,
okay.
like 24
something
tops,
like that. Okay. How many ships are in the Death Star? Because when you see the Millennium Falcon, right, flying into this thing is the size of a planet, okay? Now, you mean to tell me that a planet this size doesn't have thousands of TIE fighters and bombers? And
wasn't fully stocked.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, it wasn't fully stocked. It was perfectly completed, and apparently, they've... and you see the interior. You see how deep and large and expansive and what the population of this thing is. You mean to tell me that they couldn't put out 10,000 fighters ahead of them with their forces or other ships and whatnot? It just the numbers didn't quite really make sense to me at all. And to be honest, because they were remaking the first one, in the new one, that imbalance also seems to show up. This is supposedly the Star Killer base, which of course being the throwback to the original Luke Star Killer name that he was supposed to have, I guess.
Right.
Do you mean to tell me on a planet this big that they don't have planetary base defenses as well as large caliber ships and a vast, and I do mean vast, number that they could have thrown out to defend this? Oh no, this particular base is vital to the operation of this entire planet, and if it goes, we're all gonna die.
I would say
numerically, I didn't buy it.
I would say that the excuse there could be is that the First Order simply does not have the resources at its disposal that the Empire did. Except that many of the other shots that they put in the film seem to evoke that anyway. You know, like they kind of hint at the idea about, like, because they don't use clones for stormtroopers anymore.
Well,
And
yeah, but yet they seem to be grown up in this environment to think.
Well, they're abducted.
Are
They're abducted. They're abducted. Yeah, they're abducted as
So
children.
they're
basically like
conscripted.
Spartans.
Okay, all right, that's weird. But yeah,
So-
and that whole.
But you could take it basically that without, they're no longer the official government, right? And they simply don't have the hard currency to go to a planet and buy generations and generations of clones to use as soldiers. So now they're abducting.
Yeah,
people.
well, the details there is that we don't quite know exactly all the underpinnings of how many are on which side and whatever, and you know, we don't have any of the practical numbers that can relate those kind of situations. All you see is big planets with all this junky metal, and you gotta think, man, these people never heard of recycling? I mean, you think the material and the supplies and whatever else that you could do with these giant ships that probably suck up the whole metal out of an entire planet just to make one of them, and yet they seem to have an endless supply of these things. It just seems kind of weird as far as that aspect goes.
Yeah, I think.
But hey,
for me,
battle.
I think if there was a misstep in the handling of the Starkiller base thing, I think for me it was the idea that what we've seen supposedly happen since the end of Jedi and this, right, is that the war continued and the rebels eventually won and they established a new republic and the Empire retreats to the outer rim area where they reorganize as the First Order, and they obviously don't have the same resources as the Empire did. They're not the official governments. We're supposed to believe that the rebels and the Empire have simply swapped positions, and somehow in this 30 years, this republic not only won this war, reestablished itself, but then became complacent enough that they're not really interested in fighting the First Order, and that's why what we're dealing with here and what's being led by General Organa is not the Republic's own military, which supposedly does exist long enough for us to see it blown up.
I want to know where the rest of the
another
planets
group
are.
that's
in
called
all this.
the Resistance, which I guess is because they couldn't call it the Rebellion because that was the old thing, but functions too close to the same way. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean resistance? It's not. I mean, they're essentially a pro status quo force that's fighting off the First Order. Resistance doesn't really fit either.
No.
I know that they had to abandon rebellion because that's you rebel against the Empire.
Well,
but
was the Empire technically
still
defeated?
doesn't
See, I
quite
don't know
fit.
the details of that. They haven't quite explained that to me yet. And they certainly
As I
did within the
understand
films.
it, and then this is this is third hand. They've apparently put out a novelization that covers the period between the last official movie and the new one. I haven't read it. I've only heard people
Talk about
quote it. To address those particular questions. Yeah, and apparently like the last big battle between the Empire forces and the rebellion was Jakku, and that's why all of that hardware is there in the desert. That's why that's the new. I actually appreciate, and it was funny. I guess another thing I want to talk about is the thing Lucas said earlier this week.
You said something this week?
Yeah, he basically said that he didn't like the retro feel of the new film, and he
Hi,
compared
George.
Disney to white. He compared Disney to white slavers.
What?
He said that his films were his children and he sold them to white slavers.
No. George is upset that other people made a better looking and better selling film than what he could. He had moved on and wanted to do all these other technical jiggery pokery
No, he
things.
hasn't moved on. That's the thing. What was the last thing he made?
Sith. That's the last one that
well, I mean,
made that I know of.
he made the prequels, but even between that, what have you got after? What have you got after the first Star Wars films and the new ones? You've got films he made with Spielberg, which are the Indiana Jones films. Then you got Howard the Duck and Willow. I think there's some other stuff in there, but he keeps making these noises like, I'm going to go back to making experimental films like THX 1138. And I rewatched that a while ago, and man, that thing is
not holding up.
Mean, it looks great, but it's obtuse. It's obtuse and pretentious without really much to back it up.
Well, let's not
to the point of almost being nonsensical.
Let's not turn this too much into a George bashing thing, but not that we can do a whole thing on that.
Well,
but
he's the one who called Disney white slavers. I mean, the Empire of the Rat has got a lot to answer for, but he might have stepped over a line there with regard to that specific
who made
thing.
all his toys? I forget. I could have. I don't think they were
Kenner. I thought.
Yeah,
no?
but I don't think they were all employees. Is my point. But anyway, Yeah, but as far as the film goes and everything, yeah, okay, it's a remake of the first one. I'm fine with that, and he did a very good job with it.
I'm also
I
fine
couldn't
with that.
figure out for the life of me how the hell, at the end of it, giant spoiler alert, that when run if you really don't want to hear this, when Rey comes to see Luke could not have picked a more R2 unit inaccessible place to hang out. Because when R2 gets off the ship and you see all those convoluted steps and outcroppings of islands on a planet filled with water, I'm sorry, he probably looked up and said, Luke said, fuck you, dude, I am not climbing these damn things. Because nowhere in the world would he be able to get up those things. Not in a million years. If he'd started at the bottom and had to reach up to the top, the film would have been over before he got halfway. So that in and of itself, I thought
didn't
was
have
weird.
that thought. I looked at the island and then I looked at him and I wondered, dude, what are you eating out here? There's nothing but grass. I mean,
the Force, we don't need to eat. I mean, come on, you saw what Yoda was like, and all he used to live on was Twix. So yeah, I mean, who the heck knows? But
I mean, Alec Guinness did not look like that in the first film. I mean,
no, and he lived in a desert.
Looks positively
would have been
portly.
Would have been worse. Okay. But no, it just seemed a weird location. That this is where he's hanging out. Seriously, in a place where
eject Porkins.
Yeah,
eject.
it just
no, I got it.
Oh.
I'm all right.
Well, whatever it is, it seems to be full of carbs. But yeah, no, I
just one more Malamar.
No, I never liked Malamars, to tell you the truth. But yeah, it just seemed kind of a weird thing. Somebody had actually quoted me at some point that he wanted certain characters to have more screen time. And it didn't spoil it for me, but I think he was referring to the end with Hamill, because you see his face for all of 30 seconds. Which I can't say is surprising, but I kind of wish that he would have either had a little bit more dramatic foreshadowing or a little something.
I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought
you didn't see him at all.
I would have thought that they had in typical Abrams style that he would have been in the box, and so he would have been in the mystery box, and you wouldn't have gotten, And I think we got a little bit more than what he would have liked to have given. I think he would have been fine with us just having the shot of R2 in the metal hand and letting us live with that. But but that's fine actually. I think maybe
why has he gone all metal? That's what I don't get. What's up with that? His skin wear out?
Well, I have an idea about
really?
that.
I just didn't know if that had been mentioned or referenced or something. Or
the films. Again, having rewatched the first three, I did not rewatch the prequels, but there are some scenes in there that are relevant.
I've never heard of them before. What prequels? There are no prequels.
There is a clear prejudice in the film against droids.
You think? Come on, they're slaves.
Yeah. And it starts with the way that the droids get treated in the cantina.
Yeah, we don't serve their kind here. I mean, yeah, that was the whole parallel.
And nobody argues this. Of
course not.
And I would say none of the characters argue it, and the film doesn't argue
Nope.
it. The film tacitly acknowledges this idea that, hey, humans are over here, droids are over here. And then Alec Guinness's Kenobi character in that film, is dismissing Darth Vader. He's more machine than man. So in other words, there's a parallel between replacing your body parts with machine and this turning to the dark side and this corruption. And they double down on that in Jedi, right? When at the end of Empire, Darth cuts off Luke's hand and that he supposedly loses the blue lightsaber, which never is seen again until this movie. And Luke gets, at the end of Empire, a hand that is machine inside, but looks human on the outside. And then in the new movie, we see a hand that is clearly metal on the outside. So I think there may be a transition here. And there's also a prequel shot, right? Because the same thing happens to Anakin, and he's doing his wedding scene, and he's got a clearly robotic-looking hand. And I think the idea is supposed to be is that this process of getting scars and being maimed and having prosthetics is somehow part of this process of being tempted and perhaps turning to the dark side.
You have less humanity in you, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the thought I had, and again, maybe this may be projecting on the film something that is not even there and will not get called back. But I thought that Luke having a more obviously metal hand may be an acknowledgement of that part of himself that he was hiding by having a human hand or a human-looking hand that was actually mechanical. And it also made me think that same thing, right? When you got the Kylo Ren character, right, who has this amateurish-looking mask, who idolizes Darth Vader. He's basically an emo poser. He's a Darth Vader fanboy. He's simultaneously a representation both of the fan base and the director, right? Because he's doing for Darth Vader just what Abrams is doing with Star Wars and what Abrams did with Spielberg and with Star Trek before that, which is that like, oh, okay, I see how things look on the surface. You put it together this way. You add this element and this element and this element, and that's how you get Star Trek, and this is how you get Star Wars. So what he's saying is basically, I put on a black robe, I put on a mask, I change my voice, and even the voice the voice effect is also like intentionally cheesy.
Yeah,
or at least it's not. At least it's not as bad as Bane. At least you can understand what he's saying.
Well, see, that's
though.
the thing. I never understood why it was there. It was there with Darth Vader because that's the only way he could talk through the friggin' mask.
Because he wants it. Because he wants it there. He's obviously made the mask expressly for the purpose of hiding his face and making this voice. Not because he needs to, because he's scarred, but because, unlike Darth Vader, he has no scars to hide. The mask is there to hide his absence of scars, his youth and his long hair and all of this stuff that identifies him as young, inexperienced, and unworthy of the mantle of Darth Vader. And of course, they put that right in the Rey's character's mouth in the pivotal scene.
Not only
there.
that, but it also is an expression of his frustration, of which you never saw Darth do. I love the fact that he starts slicing up consoles and stuff with his lightsaber, and that's. Wow, this guy is really an emo little twit. I mean, this is kind of terribly annoying. But no, actually, you know what? All I could think of is when he was when he had the mask on and when he was talking through it, all I could think of was, you remember that scene from True Lies where they're talking about a terrorist who says he called the Sand Spider, and you hear the guy say, why? He goes, probably because it sounds scary. And that's all that I got from this guy in his mask. It's like, why the hell is he wearing it? Probably because it sounds scary, and that's it. And it just it's so phony and transparent and kind of annoying. And at some point, I had thought maybe you would see this character's evolution where he was hurt or damaged or wounded and frustrated and angry, and then he's wearing the mask, and that's why. And they never gave me that.
No, he's wearing. I think the whole point of this is that he's going to eat. You're right, but he's going into it backwards. He's going into it backwards because what happens during the fight, right? He gets a facial scar. Rey gives him a facial scar with a saber. So he's kind of doing the transformation backwards. I read several things that basically said, Kylo Ren is what Kylo Ren has achieved in that character what Lucas wanted to do for Anakin.
And I think accomplish it.
Right. Well, that's just it. The reality is a little bit different, is that Kylo Ren is what Lucas thought he had achieved with Anakin. But the whole point was, though, is that nobody watches the first 3 movies and wants the question answered, hey, why is Darth Vader like that? Nobody wants that. It's a question that doesn't need an answer at all, because he's just evil and that's it. And that's the thing you get out of, say, Tolkien or out of Star Wars, is that there isn't any nuance to it. Characters don't need to change from one thing into the other. He projected that onto it because what nobody knew was that in Lucas's head there already was this character of Anakin Skywalker, who's referenced only in the fleetingest ways in the original film, who was good, and therefore Lucas has this question in his head that he needs answered, which is, how do I start off with a good character and eventually get to Darth Vader? And the problem basically is that working in that direction, I think you can't... I don't even think it's a question that he didn't achieve it. I'm not sure anybody could have. Well, because I don't think anybody can realistically portray that. I mean, I don't think he did a good job of it. But you could start off with Kylo Ren, and you get to work it backwards. He's already kind of in that middle transition period, and that's what we see. We see him make his decision about what he's going to do.
Because it seems to be the second decision, because they lead on before in the film. They hint that he had been trained by Luke, and he was responsible for ruining the new Jedi, and why Luke decided to take a powder. And if that was the case, I would have think that would have been the transitional decision-making point. And what really seems hypocritical to me, if that was the case, why is Kylo Ren, for whatever reason, really hung up on the whole traitor aspect? Because you see him screaming at people several different times. It's like, excuse me, pot calling kettle, come in kettle, you're black. because for him to come out and say that after ruining Luke and the Jedi, as not to mention the fact killing his own dad, it's like, wait a minute, hold on here.
Yeah.
What are you talking about screaming traitor at anybody, pal? It makes no sense to me as far as that. And yet they needed that for that character for the whole evil aspect of it. I just couldn't understand why they chose to go with the whole traitor point.
That falls prey to a deleted scene.
Oh,
that's
does
the problem.
it?
Is that there are scenes with Finn and Phasma that got deleted that I think that underscore the Finn character's prominence to the leadership. It's obviously looking at them that they've got discipline problems,
obviously.
right? I mean, they're aware of this. They have this division. In other words, that going from clones to abductees, they've got discipline problems and they know it. And this is just the latest, perhaps the greatest one. This clear defection.
Speaking of Phasma, love that she's a dick, but actually, and you'll see in my gameplay over here in Jakku, every now and then you'll see a character. You'll actually see stormtroopers wearing armor. And the helmets are off, and
is Phasma in it?
No, but there are women. There are female stormtroopers, and with their helmets off, and you know that they're women. And I noticed this when the gameplay and whatnot. I was targeting people, and suddenly realized I'm shooting at attractive women in stormtrooper uniforms who were shooting at me. And I'm hesitating.
That happens in Destiny all the time.
No, I know, but it's just that you're not used to seeing that in Star Wars. In Star Wars, all nameless, faceless characters. They're all semi-robots or clones.
So wait a minute.
Suddenly,
there are female stormtroopers in Battlefront? In the Battle of Jakku? Okay, because what I read actually was that there was not going to be any Force Awakens content in the Battle of Jakku DLC. And the justification that I read from the developer, I think from DICE, who was passing on information they got from their communication with Disney and Lucasfilm, was that DLC is supposed to be happening during the time frame of the actual last battle, right? Which is after Jedi, but way before Force Awakens.
Yeah, because it's 30 years from now. Yeah, no, you're not seeing anything from Force Awakens.
Right.
But there are female stormtroopers.
So those should be clone troopers you're fighting there.
No, they're humans.
Female
they're humans
in there.
Well,
they shouldn't be.
See, that's the thing.
Wrong. That means the answer they've given us for why there's no Force Awakens content.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that not all stormtroopers are clones, and that's the whole point. In fact, there are
right, but they should have been. They should have been at that time.
I mean, that's a whole argumentative timeline as far as when and how long the clone system was in play at the time. I mean, you'd have to go delving deeper to the Star Wars universe than I have knowledge of. But anyway. The point being is
that... I think there was a scene...
Yeah, no, the point that I'm trying to make is that suddenly what were nameless and faceless characters, which we had no problem shooting of at any given time, suddenly I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's not only a woman, that's an attractive woman, and I'm not feeling so good about shooting this character right now. And, okay, it's a video game, and yeah, it's not real and whatever, but still, I'm like, I don't want to be doing this. I felt bad about it. It's like... Actually, and it was weird.
I was waiting. I was waiting for the film to address that too, because of the way it opens. Right? We start to empathize with the Finn character, and for the first time, you see a stormtrooper bleed.
Well, not only that, you see a stormtrooper as a human and as a real and as a person.
Yeah, I mean, there were fights in the cantina. That there's that monster that Kenobi took the arm off with the lightsaber, and there was blood. Although there's not been a lot of blood in Star Wars since that moment that I can think of, at least not on a humanoid character. But they took these guys, that they were just all in the same uniforms. You don't know what they are, and then the prequels introduces the idea that they're clones, and then in the prequel before that they replaced them with robots. It was just the idea that they want to have action sequences, but they need to have cannon fodder, and you can't have Nazis everywhere because it doesn't make sense. So they needed somebody expendable, somebody the good guys can shoot without anybody feeling bad about it, and then they make you feel bad about it. He makes himself feel bad for what he's seeing. He also doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to kill. And I was waiting for that to come home to roost a little bit later, where he was like, "Hey, wait a minute. These guys I'm shooting at. Yeah, I understand the First Order is evil, but these are the guys I was bunking with and eating chow with the other week, but."
They don't quite point that out. I was surprised.
He's all gung-ho for shooting stormtroopers. And I guess...
You can't imagine a guy who's on a police force suddenly decided to join the criminals and then shoot his former cops. I mean, that would be weird. or anybody in a platoon suddenly saying, "Hey, I'm going to attack the own army that I was in just a couple weeks ago." Do you know what I mean?
So I think the accusation of traitor there actually works, at least from that level. And I think the film tried to kind of have it both ways. They tried to say, hey, here's a new thought with regard to stormtroopers.
Yeah.
They're people. They're people who are dying in here when you shoot them. And then they conveniently, once that's established, Finn's character, they conveniently forget that, even to the point of making him really gung-ho for killing stormtroopers. I could see him being really gung-ho for defeating the First Order, but killing stormtroopers reluctantly, because that was the only way. I was waiting for him to try to convince some other stormtrooper to put his gun down or something, and they just never went anywhere near that.
That's the thing, because that also has gotten the contrary female aspect of it, because you see them as people, but now there are women in these things too, and shooting women is a whole nother thing. So, I was hoping that was actually going to happen. Maybe they'll do it later. But yeah, Phasma was actually one of the characters I was really interested in seeing. And yeah, unfortunately, she didn't have a lot of screen time. And she never took off her helmet.
They did not get a lot.
So that was a little disappointing.
I think there was supposed to be at least one other scene where there was a confrontation between her and Finn over the disciplining of him for that first thing, and I think that got left on the cutting room floor, or maybe never even got shot. Bonus. I don't know. It's kind of too bad,
because I wanted to see a lot more of her, and not to mention that of what they did show of Ben, i.e. Ren. And now his name's rhyming. Him taking off the helmet and whatnot, and Rey's response to that is like, "Oh, hey, you're not really ugly. Okay, you're evil, but you're kind of pretty."
I'm waiting for all the Kylo Ren
Oh, you think? Yeah, it's gonna happen.
I'm waiting for that.
Okay.
In fact, I bet if I Google for that right now,
are you on board with the BB-8 crew, or are you happy with his portrayal? How do you feel, if anything?
I got no objections to BB-8. Really?
To be honest, and I think I read this beforehand, which was probably a bad idea, but I think somebody had a review or a comment somewhere on Slash Film that mentioned he was getting like a Scrappy-Doo feel from him. And after it, my only real complaint was whatever acoustical tone that they picked for his beeping voice, I wasn't a fan of that. And other than that, it didn't bother me at all. Maybe I'll get warmed up to it. Maybe I'll get used to it or whatever. But when he started booping and beeping, I was like, really? That tone? Because of all the acoustical frequencies they picked, that one? It just kind of irked me for a second. But I definitely got to feel that he is a culmination of R2-D2 and WALL-E. They were trying to get the whole anthropomorphic feel through it. And in a minimal aspect, with the whole soccer ball thing,
he sounds a lot like WALL-E to
and
me.
there are so many cute little Murphy moments and whatnot, and they're great, and I like them all and whatnot, but it was just the sound, his voice, I guess is the only way you could describe it as. I wasn't sold on the voice yet. Maybe after subsequent viewings I'll probably not even remember that, but for whatever reason, that was the only thing that irked me about his character. And C-3PO, I was kind of surprised. Could somebody explain the red hand or why that is relevant or something? Because he makes note of it, and yet I have no idea what that means or what relevance that is.
Do I know if it's a specific reference to something?
I'm just wondering what it means. Because he says, "Oh, you probably don't recognize me because of the red arm," and that was supposed to be a joke.
I think it's just a bit of business. I think it's
I
supposed
thought it was
to be
something relating to the story that you didn't see, or was in another part or a venue of the Star Wars universe.
Well, okay, it could be a callback to the first film where he falls down and loses
maybe.
an arm.
I have a feeling that for people who watch the cartoons and have read the books or whatnot, that there's something there that explains that. It's just because it wasn't in the film, I was scratching my head saying, why are they drawing attention to this? So I didn't know if you got that feeling or cared at all either, but I was like, going, huh? All right, what's that about? And then they never talk about it after that. So I think it was one of those things where diehard fans who've researched it and know it were happy to see it there or understood it, whereas me, I was confused because I haven't delved that deep, I guess. So
Abrams apparently says it's basically just a way of allowing a character to change over time. And so if you look at a character that's supposed to be static, like a droid, right? You don't expect a droid's character to develop, but parts could change. So I don't know if it's a direct callback to the first one, but I always thought it was kind of a mistake the way Lucas did these things, right? Where in 2 out of 3 of the films, you end with a triumphant celebration where everybody dusts themselves off and gets dressed up.
Let's party.
And so the droids go from being scarred and dirty
shiny
to being shined up. And it basically is like, okay, start over, reboot. and I really think that was a mistake. And so I don't know if it figured into his thinking at all, but I looked at the red arm in that first scene and say, hey, wouldn't it have been cool if that first time when 3PO fell in the Sand People attack, he broke his arm, and they had to go to a Jawa to get one, and it was red, and he put it on, and forever after that he had a red arm. So you would always know it's 3PO instead of some other droid. You notice they show these protocol droids all the time, and they have different voices, and they always have to make them slightly different color, because otherwise you'd think it was 3PO. But you would never have that problem if 3PO was the one with the red arm.
Okay, First Order.
Also, it lets them sell a different toy.
They're all going to sell a billion of these things. First Order. I got a very Hitler Youth vibe from this thing. Like a bunch of kids who found their daddy's guns.
Well, stormtroopers are basically just Nazis anyway.
So,
I get,
but it's just for whatever reason they didn't seem, and I think it's because the youthful representation of all their generals. What are these? 25? I mean, I swear, it's like a military run by children.
I think that's the idea. I think the idea is supposed to be is that this is not the Empire. It's the status quo. It's the things have flipped, right? The old people are running the Republic, and the young people are.
Is that the motif they were going with?
It's like that Kinks song.
I just didn't know if that was intentional or if it was just because those characters they're looking for either some longevity out of them or it's supposed to be the youthful rebellion is now with the evil people as opposed to the other way around.
I would say it's just a more practical thing. In other words, when you have the money to buy clones and you're the establishment, everybody's in the government, and the only people who want to be part of the rebels are the people who are on the outside, the people who are downtrodden, that kind of thing. And I would say, they don't have experienced military. I get the idea that this guy is a general at that age because that's what they have, because everybody else is dead.
I don't know.
The same thing for why is Kylo in the position he is? Like, is he a Sith? Is he not?
Where does he fit in the whole structure?
I didn't even want to mention the character's name, but now I have to because I backed myself into a corner. Supreme Leader Snoke, which one letter away from Snook.
I was waiting for somebody to call him Snooky. It's just as bad as name is Dooku.
If you told me Lucas was uninvolved, I would have pointed that name and say, "Are you sure?"
Now,
because that sounds like
a
one
Star
of his.
Wars name generator somewhere on the web that you put in certain characters and whatnot.
Probably.
So I have a feeling that they went through a bunch of those, and I don't know, either somebody lost a bet or somebody thought this was a terrible name and just couldn't speak up during the staff meeting and saying, we need to pick something else. But yeah, I'm sorry, I hear that name and I have to cringe. It's just
not
it's
great.
Too silly. Okay, cross member on the lightsaber. What the F? Somebody was. Oh, really? It didn't bug you. It bugged the crap out of me. And the only reason I saw it existing was so that you could twist and poke it in somebody's shoulder when you're really close. It's like, seriously?
It bugged me earlier. Like when the images came out and it was in the trailer, I said,
I saw
dumb.
it in the trailer.
That's just dumb. You can't convince me it's
later,
not dumb.
Somebody made
but
a
I had already
video
worked
with that, which was absolutely hysterical. So if you get a chance, look on the web for it.
But I had already worked through that, and also actually having gotten in the film, right? And the crappy voice and the kind of stupid looking mask and the lightsaber itself, just kind of sputters, right? It's inelegant. I mean, the whole idea of a lightsaber is supposed to be this classy looking and sounding thing. It's supposed to be elegant, and his is not. So to me, it was like the death metal fanboy lightsaber, right? I think I could see him putting those things on there because he thought it was cool. Even though it's objectively a dumb idea, he's exactly the kind of guy who would do that, who would put something on there that's more likely to hurt himself than anybody else, but he would do it anyway because of death metal. I mean, I kind of bought that. The character's stupidity is part of it, and it's the thing that it's the thing about it that works. It never worked about the Anakin character because the Anakin character was stupid, and nobody was supposed to acknowledge the fact that it was stupid. This person was doing dumb things for dumb reasons, and I just like the way it's played here better. It's out in the open. Those stormtroopers, see him smashing up the console, and they turn around and walk the other way, and it's a laugh.
It was comical, and why he flipped out at hearing that there was a girl involved, I didn't understand why that was suddenly relevant. Speaking of stormtroopers, what's with the flamethrowers? Just from a practical standpoint,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess
flamethrower is a particular weapon
Flamethrower on a desert. That's gotta.
Here's the thing. When they were using it.
Are you doing defoliation? What are you doing?
It's a certain weapon that is used in certain circumstances, especially it's usually used in environments where you were trying to either block off, cordon, or funnel particular people, but it's also used to deoxygenate and set aflame people in caves and in tunnels, so you don't have to go in after them and get ambushed. And for it to be used on an open desert where you see them setting either, I don't know if they're tents or junk that you see on the desert on fire.
Yeah, but
why?
Right, but you'd think though that most of the structures in a desert area would be
it's
mud
an anti-personnel weapon,
right? So,
and they're,
so all you're doing is
right.
baking them. They're not actually going to burn. So I did think that was silly. I think basically the problem with that is just that movie shorthand for that
is
kind
you
of
need
scene,
fire.
which is I'm gonna come wreck your village, is you set it on fire, and it's merely inconvenient that it is a desert and most of their building materials should probably be non-flammable, and therefore this is not the appropriate weapon for that. But they just want that because it sells the Vietnam angle, right? These guys are going in and they're torturing the locals for information, and then they're going to burn the village down at the end anyway. So I think they just throw in the flamethrower because they can't divorce those ideas from that image.
It's funny you mentioned about the dirty lightsaber versus the other lightsabers. Could be maybe he doesn't have the technical expertise for it, because I'm trying to see if I can find any clip footage that'll compare that with the old one to see whether they did the same thing to the old blue one. Now, speaking of lightsabers, they didn't. The blue one is cool. Why is it that the evil people all have red ones? And all the other Jedis can pick any other color.
Again, it's just a visual. It's just a visual shorthand.
So red bad.
It's just a visual shorthand. Is it just
that red on the color wheel looks great for evil people, and they can't pick any other colors, or
the dark side of the Force uses longer?
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I guess. And if that was the case,
I don't know.
Does that mean that Darth Vader's lightsaber, when he first was using it, was blue until he got rid of it, or lost it, or was stolen, or what? That doesn't quite make. That's not clear.
Well, he did. His original one was blue.
So did he use that for a while as Darth Vader before he changed it?
I don't know. I don't know. You know what? I would have to look at the prequels and see when he switches.
The other thing is
because I don't remember. Because the problem with that basically is that like they do a clear transition for Luke, right? Luke loses his innocence in Empire when he confronts Vader in what he thinks is a fight, and is actually just Vader trying to turn him and is playing games with him until the end, when he kind of spares his life in the sense that he lets, rather than kill him, he lets him dive off the platform, right? And he's lost his hand, and he's lost his blue lightsaber, and he comes back with a green one, which is, I guess, a neutral color. So we're supposed to think he's moved away from the purity, but he has not yet gone to the dark side.
Here's what I don't
and Anakin also, his first one is blue, but we never actually see that moment that he goes to red, and it would be stupid in a moment of action to say, hold on a second, I gotta adjust I gotta switch my lightsaber color now because I've decided to kill children and be evil.
I think some bad guys in the cartoons are red. His is Kylo Ren is red, but no other.
Right, but you never saw Dooku being anything else. Dooku had a cover. He was this guy that nobody thought was evil until it turned out he was. I guess they just didn't know he had a red lightsaber at his desk the whole time.
Or white. What about white?
I don't know.
Obi-Wan have a white one?
The Swiss have white. The Swiss guards have white lightsabers because they're neutral.
Right, but nobody seems to touch violet. I think somebody had a yellow one in one of the prequels. But nobody went with yellow green, and nobody went with blue.
You see a bunch of them. It's like they don't mean
violet.
anything. They can't mean anything. It's simply not possible.
I want to see an orange.
You'd think the Jedi Council will be sitting around saying, "I've been watching so and so. His lightsaber is looking a little purple these days. You better watch him." You know what I mean?
I don't know. It's just when looking at the color wheel, the only color that I can equate with visually as evil is somewhere near the reddish purple spectrum, and I don't know whether a purple lavender or a purple violet or a blue violet would come off as evil.
By that time, it didn't mean anything, though. Once they left behind red and blue, it didn't mean anything at all. And I think now they're trying to snap it back. And as long as there aren't too many Jedi and Sith around, then they'll just stick with that. So wait a minute. So let me get one, maybe not last thing, but next big thing anyway, because you asked about what was this deal in the scene where Kylo Ren asks, "What girl?" and reacts as if there is some significance to this idea. And I think, if I had to guess,
was it something I missed?
I don't know. No, I think what it was is that, first of all, I hope that Rey is not directly related to any of the other characters, right? We've already got Finn, who clearly is not, right? He's not related to anybody that we already know. We do have an existing relationship such that Kylo Ren is part of the Skywalker family, right? Luke is his uncle, and Leia and Han are his parents, and Darth Vader's his grandfather, and that sets him within this relationship in terms of why he is the way he is. We'll find out hopefully at some point how it is he got from, being a baby to betraying Luke and killing some people, and supposedly, I guess, turning not just himself, but also I think a bunch of his other fellow students as well, because there's this thing called the Knights of Ren, whoever the heck they are. But I think that
So I take it you haven't looked at the family tree?
At some point, there may have been, or may still be, the idea to have it written that Rey is Luke's child with somebody else, and that perhaps distrusting his own ability, knowing that what had happened with Anakin and Obi-Wan, right? Maybe he didn't want to train his own child. So maybe he abandoned his own child alone on a desert, figuring that would work out okay because it worked on him, right? That Anakin, Anakin's official training didn't turn out well, and that if you just kept this child away from the whole thing, so he's going to do a Jedi Academy thing, but he's not going to train his own flesh and blood. And I think at some point I hope they wrote that idea out. So I think they started with the idea basically that Rey and Kylo Ren were cousins, and that if Ren is aware of the existence of this person, that he might be looking for them to get rid of them or to turn them. And that makes a lot of sense out of some of the scenes that are in there. And it makes sense of this idea that there's a girl that he is interested in for some reason, such that there being one at this scene is of some significance to him. And unfortunately, I think if they take that away, because one thing I did read basically is that, like, in one version of the script, Rey's character was desperately trying to get off Jakku. And if she was Luke's daughter and somehow knew it or suspected it, it would make sense. There would be a direct parallel between Luke in the first, in the fourth movie, and Rey in the seventh one, right? They're both stranded on a nowhere backwater desert planet and want to get off to join the adventure. Yep. And then they flip that. That she's been abandoned and she feels she needs to stay there because they're going to come back. And they do the Maz Kanata scene where she tells her that, whoever you're waiting for isn't coming back, but Luke could come back. I hope what they've decided to do is to make Rey a nobody. In other words, you kind of watch A New Hope, and yes, there are scenes where Kenobi talks about, who your father was, and he was a good friend, a good pilot. But you know what? I never took that to mean, by the way, you're the most important person in the galaxy, because this person who was extremely powerful turned evil, and you're his son, and you're the only one who can either defeat him or win him back, or both. It went from being an everyman, where it's like, oh wow, man, you can be a nobody farmer in the middle of the desert, and you can turn out to be a hero. All you have to do is answer the call to adventure.
Have a high metachlorian count.
You just have to be willing to go on the adventure. And at first, just like Rey, actually, he's not willing to go, right? It's not until his aunt and uncle get killed that he's willing to say, well, I might as well now. I have no domestic life. I might as well go with you on this thing. So
this is America. We don't care who your daddy is.
Yeah, so he wasn't a glory hound. He wanted to get off, but he wasn't a glory hound. He talked a big game. I want to get out of here. I want to join the rebellion. And then Kenobi comes along and says, hey, come with me. And he's like, oh, I can't. I'll get in trouble. So, and then it turns out he's space royalty. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh, okay, you had no chance to do this because this was destiny.
I'm a prince.
Exactly. He's a prince. It's genetics. It's whatever else. It turns out, he's a prince and his sister's a princess, and he had no choice in the matter at all. It's Greek tragedy. So I would really kind of like it if they take that angle and remove it. And if you got Finn and Rey, and they're not related to each other, and they're not related to anybody else, that just means these are special people with aptitude and opportunity who take advantage of those things and make themselves important in this fictional universe. And I would like that a lot better than the idea of we have to find the special children. Because that's not really that interesting to me.
Well, what I find terribly annoying and terribly confusing, and I don't know why this is even a thing. Supposedly, if you check out the wiki, you can actually see that Ben Solo, who is the son who is now Kylo Ren, who is the son of Leia and Han Solo, apparently there's also going to be, or spoiler alert,
which wiki are you looking at?
Well, this is
looking at Wikipedia.
Just Wikipedia. It says just Skywalker family. Supposedly, there is also going to be, spoiler, runaway, a Ben Skywalker, and supposedly named after Ben and Obi-Wan.
I think you're looking at a wiki that is based on the expanded universe that is no longer canonical.
Oh, maybe. Well, see, that's just it. So the question is, what are they drawing from? What are they going to use? What are they going to change? Well, supposedly this is canon. There is a thing here that says canon, because they're supposedly Luke hooked up with what's her face over here? Yeah, Mara Jade, and
no, Mara Jade is the
so
EU.
Why
that's not canon anymore. That's old.
Oh, okay. So they decided to change it. So
well, they basically said that all of that stuff is no longer canon. And again, they will probably mine it for bits they like, and people who know the EU will recognize the similar bits and say, "Hey, you just took this and then added this." But no, Mara Jade is definitely, because I've heard the name, that is definitely an expanded universe character who currently, at this moment, does not, as far as we know, exist.
Well, that being said, so it's just trying to figure out where they're planning on taking this and whatnot. Yeah, it can be terribly confusing for those who not only are hip deep in all of the stories and the books and the animations and the cartoons and whatever else, but also for those who have absolutely no experience with them whatsoever, which would be me. So I don't know where they're going to be taking it either. I don't know how and why they're going to be progressing with this, or as far as what her character is, or the end parameters, whether she's going to be related to anybody. I'm waiting for somebody to come up and say, "No, I'm your father." You just know what's going to happen. The question is to who and where. So if they're going to be following the same trajectory as remaking and or redoing similar stories that worked in the previous movies, the question is how much more, if any, will they continue on with that. So yeah, that's all going to be coming in the future. But as far as the film itself, yes, it was incredibly enjoyable. It was very put together, technically fantastic.
Yeah, the first third of that.
I am now looking forward to the other ones. Rumor has it the Blu-ray is going to be coming out possibly within about 4 or 5 months.
Really?
If anybody's caring about the box office records, it's breaking and shattering them all over the planet. And as far as I know, it hasn't even gone to foreign markets yet.
It's already beaten Titanic. I think the question basically now is
Jurassic World's gone.
whether China will be enough to push it past Avatar. And if so,
to be honest,
I
would say it's a foregone conclusion. I really have no doubt.
I don't own any Disney stock, so I got no stake in that. I mean, if it does, it's If it does, it's nice.
I don't care myself either.
I
was just thinking the turnaround time is going to be very short, and I think that's a good thing. Because a lot of times it used to have these huge gaps in markets where you wouldn't see.
You know what though? 4 months is almost
DVDs
too short.
Or tapes.
4 months is almost too short.
Really?
Because then you have
it. I would love it.
No, 6 months is fine for me because honestly, when you start getting as low as 3 or 4 months, those things come out and you're like, oh, do you want to watch that? And my first reaction is like, didn't we just see that? Like we just saw, you know what I'm saying? Like that's too short. That's too short for me for a second viewing for most films. Now I've seen this one twice already, basically just by coincidence. When the reviews came out opening week, we saw an opening and we went to go see it. And then just a couple of days ago, a friend of mine who's here said they were getting together a group to go, and did we want to go? And we went on the spur of the moment and saw it again. But we weren't planning on it. They also seem to enjoy it. I mean, nobody's saying it's Citizen Kane. I would say the first third of it is really quite tight. I mean, like it doesn't really put a foot wrong in those first 30 or 40 minutes. After that, it does seem to. You can see some of the rough bits being paged over, and you can like, all right, I kind of see where there's some scenes that are missing here, and there's some things that are changed here, like the Poe Dameron pilot character was supposed to die, and then they bring him back, and they don't explain, how he did that. To be honest,
I was glad that he didn't die.
I was
have
too.
to say, I was very happy,
and I was also
also
glad that they didn't really explain it. Like, I think if it had been written that way, they would have felt obligated either to give you too much explanation or maybe show some scenes of what he was doing. And to me, it was just as believable that, he ejected on the other side of another dune and had some other adventure and got there, and that's fine for me. But there's obviously a bunch of things that changed between Rey trying to leave Jakku and Rey trying to get back to Jakku, and whether the Maz Kanata character comes with them to the base or not, and who she gives the lightsaber to, and where did the lightsaber come from, and why does it mean anything at all that it's there.
The one question that I had from a practical standpoint is that she is living in a damaged AT-AT, right?
Yes, yeah.
That is,
which I thought was also pretty
okay. Cool. Oh well, I mean, it's understandable, right? As a visual, it's interesting. Here's the thing I don't get: if she spends her days salvaging parts out of the fallen starships and other broken stuff and whatnot, it seemed kind of weird that her character wasn't a little bit more nomadic, or why isn't she living in the giant spaceship of which she is salvaging parts? It seems far more convenient to live where you work in that type of environment, because she's already living in the broken out Hulk of Iraq.
I think.
Why doesn't she live at the bigger broken out Hulk that has more parts that she needs, rather than schlepping across the desert? Because they have a bunch of scenes of her doing that. And on a desert planet where water is scarce, and in fact, that's the other thing. She didn't seem to carry a whole lot of water with her. It seemed like that was kind of weird.
Yeah, okay, but
why
look,
don't you live where you work? But
I will give
easier
them.
Okay, food and water is that scarce.
First on the water, and then on the environment thing. I'll give them full credit for putting in some acknowledgement to the fact that this is a desert, which we hardly ever saw in the other films. Whenever they went to Tatooine, and that
because everybody had houses.
He was so Luke's uncle there was a moisture farmer, and there's talk there, but there's never any privation. Like, it's a desert, but nobody's ever uncomfortable. But the only thing we ever get is Anakin's idiotic remark about sand. So we're not even talking about that. But
it's coarse.
But they establish really right up front that she's poor. She's scavenging for little bits of food. She's thirsty. She's only got this little container of water. I'm like, well, they really brought home the idea that this is a desert in a way that the other films did never even bother to try to do. They weren't interested in doing that.
Well, they didn't draw attention to it anyway.
Being nomadic probably would have made a certain amount of sense on that angle in terms of limiting travel time. However, this
not
is
to mention
not
resources, energy.
Yeah, but okay, but unlike Star Trek, which occasionally cares about fuel economy and the time it takes to get places, Star Wars does not and has never cared about that sort of thing.
No.
So she has a vehicle, she's able to use it. So I'm guessing basically that visually they just wanted to establish that character in an environment that belonged to her, which probably meant taking something on a slightly smaller scale than a Star Destroyer. In a hostile environment, having some territory that and that you can defend is probably worthwhile. So this was probably the first Hulk she stripped, and it's probably empty, and she just lives out of it because, it doesn't belong to anybody else. If she's there and she defends it, and it's got nothing that nobody else wants, then it becomes a safe place for her, and that if someone were to attack her there, then she's familiar with it. I didn't have a huge problem with that. And again, if she's got a vehicle, obviously it seems like fuel is cheaper than water or food because it's never seemed to be a problem. Maybe the thing's got solar panels. Why aren't there any solar panels?
Yeah.
Two desert planets in Star Wars, nobody's got a solar panel.
Well, energy doesn't seem to be that big of a thing.
No,
blasters, you don't need to recharge
There's
them.
nothing. Nobody ever worries about that. Machines and vehicles sometimes work and sometimes don't work, but nobody is ever. I think the only acknowledgments you see every once in a while is there are scenes sometimes where X-wings are refueling, right? Because there's pipes and stuff, but that's it. Nobody ever talks about it.
Or or where it comes from. Or,
Calrissian run a gas mine, so I guess people need gas for certain things.
Gas for things.
I don't know what.
Water mining, gas mining. Actually, it was really funny. One big thing which kind of glared at me when they're schlepping around the Skykiller base in that particular vulnerable spot. I was like, okay, they're sneaking around all these different corridors and whatnot, while troops are just running around patrolling and whatnot. Why isn't anybody on a security camera pointing and telling people, yeah, they're there? That was something from the original films that they never quite did either. It's like, in an era where you have security cameras and Wi-Fi cameras and home security cameras everywhere on this planet.
But there are so many movie plots.
Space?
There's so many movie plots
that would have been
don't
ruined
survive.
by security cameras.
Yeah, that don't survive the introduction of a smartphone, and so you're just going to keep it out of that. You notice that it's not Star Trek. People don't have communicators. Every once in a while, you'll see a personal communication device, but if there are too many of them around and everybody's carrying a portable camera, then things get complicated. The thing I liked, though, and I think I didn't notice it until the second time I watched it, was the similarity of the environments. That basically, the inside of Starkiller Base, where she's climbing up and down the vertical cliffs there, is basically a callback
art design
to the opening scene when she's ransacking the Star Destroyer, and that later on, when they go in to blow up the vulnerable piece, whatever the heck it was called, I don't even remember anymore. But
there's no point.
She opens the doors to let Solo and Chewbacca in by opening a panel and removing a part. It's the same part in the same panel that she removes at the beginning scene when you first see her.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat.
Well, it's that whole, hey, she knows what she's doing.
It doesn't mean anything, but they're just underscoring the character's knowledge and abilities, and they've given her quite a few, right? I mean, she's a talented pilot. She knows engineering. She can take care of herself. She can fight, and she even learns new things as it goes on, right? Because although she's used a staff, she's never used a lightsaber, but she learns. She apparently had never used a blaster until now, but then is pretty good at it pretty quickly. Some people are pissed off that she's too good. She's a Mary Sue, and I don't care about that at all.
I don't know. She seemed fumbling around on a lot of points. Actually, how did you feel about that weird, okay, she defeats him, but now suddenly the Earth opens up and separates them so she can't... I'm sorry, didn't they people could force jump and fly through the air and with the greatest
she hasn't
ease
learned that though.
All kinds of crazy stuff.
She hadn't learned that trick yet. I admit that it's hokey.
Yeah.
It's hokey.
All I could think of was Star Trek 3, with the ground opening.
But it's hokey there.
I was like, seriously, guys?
Yeah, and it's there for this. It's there for the same reason.
Well, it's hokey and bold.
It's there for the same reason, and it's the same reason that Lucas goes back and changes stuff so that Han doesn't shoot first. The idea basically is that you want your good guy to win, but he has to win without becoming a bad guy. And unfortunately, killing a guy you've defeated who's down is kind of becoming the bad guy. So that's why Star Trek 3 ends with this thing where, he's fought the Klingon to a standstill, and now the Klingon's going to fall off the cliff. And rather than kicking him off, he tries to save him. But then the Klingon is defeated by his own desire to somehow win the fight at the last second.
Him anyway,
and that's why he falls off and dies. So I saw this. This thing was basically a way of separating those characters so that she doesn't get the chance to kill him. I think if you look at the performance there's obviously this idea that, just like the end of Jedi, right? She's angry, she's pissed off. This is fueling her ability to go through this fight. And the idea that just like Ren kind of definitively took a step towards being evil when he killed Solo, that this would be her chance to do that, and she doesn't get it.
Right, but the thing is as a plot device, it would have made more sense to me to either one of two things. If they had to separate them at that point, so either she A couldn't make choice or B had to be somewhere else, they should have given something where she had the choice to either defeat him then, or to run away and either help somebody else or be somewhere else or go somewhere else, and she chose that instead, or to have something to come between them that was random other than the ground opening up, because there was no dramatic foreshadowing for that.
I think it
seemed kind of jarring. They could have had a ship crash right there.
I think they wrote themselves into a corner there, and that was all all they could come up with, and it's probably seemed like convenience because it's like, well, we're blowing up the planet, and it's already happening, so why don't we
they need a reason for her not to kill him, and that's what they came up with. It's like, oh, she can't kill him, now they're out of reach.
Yeah, because
that seems
Finn is no longer in danger. if you manufacture
He's unconscious.
danger for him, yeah, well, that's what I mean. Saying unconscious. There's nobody confronting him. The only danger facing him is the same danger of a cliff opening up underneath him. But how do you visually display that?
Yeah, why did it open up on him?
But then how would she even save him? Like, if you make that effect, it's like, yeah, it opens up and he falls in. What is she going to do about that? She can't fly.
No, I'm just saying that it was too convenient to be going between these two characters as opposed to somebody else who couldn't have saved himself if it happened.
Right. I'm just saying that once they've written themselves into that scene as it's shot, I think that was probably the best and easiest way out. If you want to add something else
way out,
in, you've got to go back and write a bunch of other stuff. And once you've done that, you probably got to go back and rewrite some more stuff before that. So, yeah, they took a shortcut there, and it's not dramatically satisfying, right? Because it's not a decision she makes. Basically, the fight ends early, and heck, watch some shonen anime. It's the kind of thing that's going on all the damn time. You make a fight between two characters last for 5 weeks, and it's all this kind of stuff. You always have to have a reason why the fight doesn't end the first time, so you can go back and do a training arc and then come back later. So they'll revisit this confrontation at some point, whether it's next movie or the movie after that.
Well, it's going to be the next 2 movies or 3 movies or 9 movies. I mean, who the heck knows how far they're going to milk
But again,
this.
look at the inversions, right? I mean, this wasn't exactly the Darth Vader Luke Skywalker fight. It's not exactly the Kenobi Vader fight either. There was little bits of that. There were little bits of that elsewhere. I mean, the obvious parallel really is between the Ren Solo fight is the Kenobi Vader fight, right? Where he just basically kind of gives up. He lets him kill him.
If you strike me down now, nothing will happen.
And you got the
all.
inversion here. In this case, it's the bad guy who got wounded but wasn't killed. Like Luke was in the second one. So.
Yep. Well, here's the other thing. Now, we had a conversation the other day, and you seemed to think you weren't sure that Solo was dead or not.
Oh, was I?
You'd kind of hinted. Well, I don't know. Maybe he's dead or.
I think I was just making a joke because they're always. No, I was talking about Palpatine because I was wondering whether or not Snoke was Palpatine. Because Palpatine, we don't see him die; he just gets thrown down a pit. And I just made a remark that the same thing happens to Solo,
right?
Because people are always falling off things down things
survived.
like this, and then they bring them back later. So.
Yeah, no, I think Solo's definitely dead. The funny thing about
they did
Luke
run him through with the saber
falling,
first. So I mean,
no, it's just that with Luke falling, and that's where he lost the blue lightsaber. You never actually see what happens to that. Luke kind of gets sucked sideways down that air shaft, which never quite understood the physics there. But
but at least they show it. They show it to you. You know, I mean,
they show it.
There's peril. There's peril there, but then they resolve that.
But but they haven't. The chain of custody is where that lightsaber went and who recovered it. When they haven't quite explained that yet. So somewhere it was on Cloud City, and somehow it ended over here.
They'll probably make a cartoon about it. How high up was that thing? How does that thing not burn up on re-entry? I mean, not really.
It was miles and miles, but yeah, it just seemed kind of weird that all of a sudden this thing showed up out of nowhere. As opposed to them something else.
That's the other thing, is that I could see that performing a particular function in the script, which is that if Rey is Luke's daughter and they're putting her in the J.J. Abrams mystery box, right, where it's like, surprise, look at that.
Oh yeah, we're waiting for the "I am your father" reveal.
Then exactly. Then the lightsaber is the link. So before you know what the connection actually is, the lightsaber is a stand-in for the connection, and that's why you have this scene where she touches it and she gets a flashback to events she has not witnessed. But they also could leave the lightsaber in as the only connection, even if they drop the idea that Rey is related, simply by saying that, well, she is force sensitive, she has aptitude for this sort of thing, and this object being an object closely associated with another character and those events who is also strong with the Force, that she just senses this. Because they don't really push it a lot. They only talk about it in Empire, but they do talk about, predicting the future, having visions of the future. So why couldn't you have a vision of the past or the future without being related to somebody, right? I mean,
Well, here's the thing, because she suddenly gets this experience by getting in proximity of this thing, and it makes it's interesting because in the second movie, Luke had those visions. They were all internal. you never saw it from the audience
Right.
perspective. It was all in his head. And here, of course, they couldn't do that. They couldn't have you have or explain those experiences without showing the audience. So
they also
now you
didn't
get to
have
see it from Rey's perspective, which was a little jarring and weird, because when Luke was having those things, he wasn't running around and reacting to them. He was just seeing them inside his skull.
Well, right.
Whereas here, she's seeing it inside his skull, but she's also seeing it as if she's there.
Right.
You know, she's a presence within it, and therefore reacting to it.
They have to make some stylistic choices. So one in Empire,
well, it was necessary. They couldn't have done it the way they did in the original.
Well, in Empire they didn't have to do anything, because the characters he's having visions about are POV characters themselves, and when the camera's not watching Luke, it's watching them. So a vision is redundant. In other words, a vision would just be a spoiler or a repetition. Either you're going to show me his vision before it happens, in which case it's a spoiler, or you're going to show it as a flashback after it's happened, in which case it's redundant. So it's basically fine for him to just say, I see my friends being tortured. We know what that is. We just saw it. That's fine. But the Rey character is not connected to that. This is supposed to be, 30 years in the past.
And she has never experienced these events. She doesn't know these people. She doesn't know what's going on.
So a visual callback makes sense. But also, if you want to just show those events, like for instance, if you wanted to make it as if she was having a dream in which she saw the events that the audience sees in those films, then basically you're just going to be reusing bits of film, right? And do you want to do that? That brings up again the visual dissonances and the differences in style and film stock even and stuff like that. So I think recreating the environments, in other words, you take the Luke and the Darth characters out, you just use the sound effects and you recreate the visual, so it's like you see that corridor. Just that corridor there is enough.
Yeah.
And you put her character in it. I think it works very well.
Well, it was definitely more interesting, and it definitely drew you in. It's just that knowing where they're coming from and who these people are and what's going on, they didn't have that same option to not do it. They had to show the audience something. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had even remotely the same kind of an impact, as opposed to her simply describing it to someone else. So, but anyway, okay, I think we've pretty much exhausted this.
Yeah, I think so.
If anybody's still watching, kudos to you. We'll send you a check in the mail. No, not really. But yeah, it was definitely a good film. I'm looking forward to the other ones. And despite its flaws, I think it's going to be incredibly successful. And they're all minor. They're all tiny little itty bitty nitpiggly things. Yeah. And it's not Citizen Kane, but hey, it doesn't need to be. It never purports to be, and we certainly don't expect it to be. So it was definitely great sci-fi action adventure in the same venue as the original. So
it achieved for me putting the franchise back on my awareness map in terms of like, oh yeah, okay, next year there's going to be a spin-off, and then the year after that there's going to be a sequel. The way what Marvel movies are coming, it's like, oh okay, the next Avengers movie comes out here, and the next Guardians movie comes out here. And
I was waiting for the giant headline that finally said it's official, Star Wars is cool again. And,
Star Wars is cool.
I think they have achieved that. So,
although again, this just put Abrams back at neutral, because he gave me back one franchise, but he took away the other one. So so he it's a wash Star Trek? As far as Abrams. No, not going to talk about Star Trek. Did not like either of the two new Star Trek movies, and I do not have any optimism for a new TV series.
Oh, me neither. Well, the TV series, I still have a smidgen. But their delivery system.
No, I will treat that just the way I treated this movie, which is that after it comes out, people will talk about it, and I will read what they talk about it to see whether it's worth looking
my
at.
time. Is that it?
And if there's a lot of information that seems to indicate that it's a quality thing to watch, then I will look at it and see for myself if it is. But
I'm going to see it anyway. The question is just how long will I see it? And I am going to see the next movie that comes out, but believe me, I am nowhere near going to be first on line.
I really don't think so. I mean, like I kind of hit myself, for even seeing the last one, because there was nothing in the first movie and nothing I read about the second movie that should have indicated that I should see the second movie, and yet I did it anyway. But that's all they're going to get out of me. It's like,
I'll put it to you this way: you know me being a Star Trek fan, I've seen all the other movies a million times. The new ones that have come out, I think I saw the first one that JJ did twice, and I have not seen the other ones again at all. And if that doesn't compare the two,
you haven't seen the Benedict Cumberbatch Khan thing?
no, I did, but again, I saw it once.
That's all you need. That's all it needs.
And
that's really all it
the
needs.
thing.
And there's
the other ones
nothing
I've watched
seen
dozens, if not hundreds. And
there's nothing I've seen or
twice.
heard or read that's any indication that the third one is going to be an acknowledgement of like, no, everything we did was wrong, and so we're changing it yet again. And without that, I've got no reason to see whatever the new thing they're doing.
It's being done by the guy who did Fast and Furious, so I'm expecting.
It's off my radar entirely.
I'm expecting Star Furious, and I think after the trailer, that's what we're gonna get.
I'll rewatch some old stuff, or I'll watch something else. I don't.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch something else. Go watch Blacklist. Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning in to hear our ramblings. Hopefully, we'll catch you on next time. And I'm not sure what our next is going to be. Have you decided where we're going to be schlepping off next? Because this was a big film thing. This wasn't our usual game thing.
No. Well, we have lots of stuff. We're recording this just after New Year's, and it'll be going up this week.
This is the first one of 2016.
In the last couple of months, we've recorded a lot of Mass Effect and a lot of Minecraft, and those episodes are going to be going up in the coming weeks. There's going to be, I think, one Destiny episode this week. We don't know what the schedule is for Destiny content for this year, so it's hard even to say what the next big thing will be.
Is there another expansion or Destiny 2 coming out?
The next new thing will be the Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition, where we're going to be picking up more or less where we left off, which was very early in the game, investigating the murder of Counselor Jake in Cyseal. We had to start over because the new game is not compatible with the old save files.
Stuff, yeah. We had to start over.
And there are lots of tiny changes everywhere, visual ones as well as the new
story system and everything.
Yeah. The way the dialogue is done, all the characters are voiced. A lot of the stuff's been streamlined and made clearer. But at the same site, it's still covering a lot of the same ground. So we're not going to redo that stuff. We're going to try to pick up where we left off.
Okay. So tune in then, guys and girls.
Yep. Thanks for listening.